Hi Grace family, this is Jim, and in this video I'll provide just an overview of my personal story and call to ministry and bring us up to where we are desiring to return to grace. And then I will provide some summary of the Q&A sessions that we've had with the small groups, and those questions have focused on three areas: God's direction for us, and ministry at Grace, and leader development of Grace. In this video, I would just focus on the leader development, as in another video, I summarize the questions on these two areas. So, beginning first, just back to a personal story and call to ministry. Born in Seattle, Washington. I was raised in the Chicago area primarily. In a family, I had my oldest sister, Debbie, and then older brother, David, and then younger brother, Steve. In high school, I was out in the Seattle area again, and it was there just through some mission trip and ministry experiences with a youth pastor that I began to sense a call to want to be involved in ministry and in the lives of people. And so I went to Moody Bible Institute in Chicago, and there I met Lori. And after Moody, I was a youth pastor for a couple of years, and Lori finished up at Trinity College. And we got married during that time, and I served 2.5 years as a youth pastor, and there just some of my gifts in teaching and leadership were affirmed. We went to another church full-time, working both as youth pastor and in overseeing the education ministry, and there God really grew a desire to return to seminary, to grad school, and to prepare for teaching and preaching ministry. And so I went to Trinity Seminary in Deerfield, Illinois, and we were there for just over 3 years. And then after completing that, we moved out to Portland, where we were church planters for 5 years. And while we were doing that, both our kids were born, Ryan first and then Michaela. And then we spent 10 years in Portland at Trinity Baptist Church. And then we spent 12 years pastoring at Grace Baptist here in Waverly, or I guess 11 years. So I'm married to Lori. We've been married 36 years this June. And again, we have 2 kids. Ryan is 27 and Michaela is 24. And after 11 years at Grace, and of course during the time of Grace, I knew at some point that God had created an interest to focus in on developing leaders and leadership development. And I returned to the University of Nebraska to complete my doctorate research and to teach and kind of earn the credential to be able to officially, in partnership with schools or at a school, be training, teaching leaders, training pastors. And but during that time, we began to see that there was doing that at a college or a seminary, or there was doing that through a church, perhaps in partnership with a school or with interns. And we were really drawn to that second option because of my gifts and desire to be pastoring. And I pastored students when I was at the university and wanted to continue to do that. And I think as we looked at schools, looked at Christian schools, seminaries, a lot of them hire pastors to teach, say, one class as adjunct. And again, in training leaders and in training pastors, it's really helpful to be on the front line pastoring. And I realized that part of God's call for my life and my desire was to pastor, and also then to be helping others who had completed their training but maybe needed an apprenticeship or some mentoring, or just kind of mentoring in the practical ways of ministry as they headed into their first church assignment. So that's leading me back to church ministry, and really feeling called to Grace to do it in partnership with a church family where I know them, and many of them know me, and I love them, and they love me, and we can work together. So moving into a summary of the Q&A that we've had with small groups. Again, some questions about God's direction for Lori and I and ministry and grace are answered in a separate video if you want to watch the summary of those. Here, I just want to take a few minutes and focus on the leader development because, again, part of my passion all through ministry has been to develop leaders, mentor leaders, be involved in training those that would be going into leadership in a ministry or in the pastoral ministry. And there's really several key ways that I feel called to do that. One is equipping volunteer leaders in grace. And I hope to do even more of this than when I was here before, training and preparing and helping people to lead and disciple others. And then training pastors or leaders with grace through interns. And this is part of training the next generation. And some of the ideas that we've talked about here are if there are some resources, Brian has gone down to part-time, and if there are some resources from his position and combined with the house, we could use that to bring in interns who would be mentored and trained by myself, but also ministry leaders and the church family of grace, giving them a variety of exposure to ministry, learning together, praying together, giving them some practical hands-on experience and some ways to take their training and put it into practice and be mentored and receive feedback and then send them on their way to ministry assignments. So that's a second way I would envision that grace would not only benefit but be participating in the kingdom to train pastors and leaders. A third way would be global pastor leaders as an extension of grace. And one of the things that research shows us is 85% of the churches worldwide are led by pastors without theological training. And 85% of those are outside of the United States. And so there's a real need to provide training, pastoral training, theological training, to leaders that are pastors around the world. And so if we could find an organization like Training Leaders International, or there's Leadership Vistas International, that are training pastors in other parts of the world where that is needed, and perhaps partner with them in a way, participate in mission trips, somewhere along the line, helping contribute to the development of global pastoral leaders. And then finally, using leadership as local outreach, training leaders in the community. I did this while I was at the University of Nebraska, sometimes spoke with county leaders, sometimes city leaders, on basic leadership topics, organizational communication, power and influence, the interpersonal relationships, but it provides an opportunity to share my story and share my faith in Christ. So those are some ways that I think together we can have an emphasis in leadership ministry, and I would look forward to be doing that in grace. So I would encourage you, if you want to have a summary of the Q&A that went on with small groups about God's direction with Lori and I, and other questions about Ministry of Grace, to watch that video. So, okay, great, thanks.